The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, but the lane markers kept shifting when I blinked. At first, I blamed fatigue. It was just after midnight, the hour when even distance feels asleep. My dashboard clock glowed 12:43 a.m., pale blue against the dark interior. The heater breathed lukewarm air that smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. Outside, winter pressed against the windows, turning the glass into cold mirrors. I had been driving for hours. The last town had faded away behind me in a blur of sodium lights and shuttered storefronts. Now there was only the road, my headlights, and the soft, endless whisper of tires on asphalt. I blinked again. The white lines slid sideways. Not much, just enough to notice. A small, liquid adjustment like something beneath the pavement had flexed. I tightened my grip on the wheel and forced a laugh that sounded brittle in the enclosed space. Focus, I told myself. Long drives did strange things to the eyes. The brain filled in blanks. That was all. Still, my pulse quickened. The radio murmured quietly, an AM station drifting in and out through static. A distant voice spoke about forgiveness, about storms, about finding light in empty places. The signal warped, stretched, then dissolved into a hollow tone. I reached over and shut it off. Silence flooded the car. The highway remained perfectly straight, disappearing into a point that never seemed to get closer. Beyond the reach of my headlights was not darkness so much as absence. No trees, no fences, no horizon, just void. Another blink. The lane markers rearranged themselves. This time the change lingered. The dashed center line smoothed into a continuous stripe before snapping back. The right shoulder crept inward by inches. My stomach tightened. I checked the mirrors. Behind me was nothing. No headlights, no distant glow, only a featureless black wall. It felt less like I was driving through the night and more like the night was being carried along with me. The road began to ripple. Not enough to feel in the suspension, just enough to see. The asphalt subtly rose and fell, like slow breathing. The cracks in the pavement stretched, then relaxed. I eased off the accelerator. The speedometer dropped. The scenery did not change. I passed the same jagged fissure in the right lane twice. A chill slid up my spine. My GPS still showed progress, the little arrow moving obediently forward, but the world outside refused to update. I tried calling my sister. No signal. I typed a message anyway and watched it sit unsent on my screen. The air in the car felt stale. I cracked the window. Cold rushed in, clean, metallic, scentless. Ahead, something reflected my headlights. Hope flared. A sign, maybe. An exit. It resolved into a blank rectangle on two thin poles. No lettering. No symbols. Its peeling surface caught the light in irregular patches, like blind eyes. As I passed beneath it, a low vibration hummed through the car, then faded. The radio turned itself back on. Breathing filled the cabin. Not one set of lungs, many. Layered, synchronized, intimate. I slapped the power button. The sound lingered half a second too long before dying. My hands were slick with sweat. The shadows started misbehaving. They lagged behind their sources. The guardrail's shadow bent away from my headlights. Dark impressions slid across the pavement independently, like stains drifting in water. I tried not to stare. The sky ahead bruised from black into deep purple, threaded with faint yellow veins. There were no stars. The moon was gone. My clock blinked. 12:43 a.m. Time had stopped. I laughed, then clamped my mouth shut as panic surged. I signaled left out of habit and tried to slow, preparing to turn around. The highway stretched. The vanishing point retreated as if pulled away on invisible rails. No matter how much I decelerated, the distance ahead remained unchanged. I turned the wheel. The road curved with me. My headlights stayed locked forward. No, I whispered. Something gathered in the rearview mirror. At first it was just deeper darkness, a distortion in the air. Then it acquired shape. Tall, narrow, flickering at the edges. It did not reflect light. It absorbed it. It matched my speed effortlessly. I accelerated. The engine roared. 70, 80, 90. The world blurred, but the shape behind me sharpened, as though pleased. Then I saw taillights ahead. A car. Relief crashed through me so hard my eyes burned. I leaned on the horn. The sound vanished without echo. The other vehicle did not respond. I closed the distance and pulled alongside. The interior was empty. No driver. No passenger. The steering wheel made tiny corrections on its own. The dashboard glowed softly, unattended. The realization landed with quiet horror. The car wasn't traveling. It was being carried. The road began to simplify. Asphalt smoothed into black glass. Lane markers sank and vanished. The shoulders fell away. Ahead, the highway narrowed into a single shining strip suspended in nothing. The presence behind me surged closer. My rearview mirror fractured into spiderweb cracks. The breathing returned, now everywhere, keeping time with my own ragged gasps. I felt it in my teeth, in my ribs, in the soft places behind my eyes. I thought of ordinary things: dirty dishes, unread emails, the smell of laundry detergent. I held onto them like anchors. The empty car ahead unraveled into thin red threads and disappeared. The road ended in a vertical wall of darkness. My headlights painted it briefly before being swallowed. I braced for impact. Instead, the car passed through. For a moment, there was nothing at all. No sound, no motion, no light. I felt myself thinning, stretching, becoming conceptual, less body than idea. Then gravity returned. The tires hit pavement. The engine sputtered and caught. Trees lined the road again. A green sign announced an exit in 2 miles. My clock advanced to 12:44 a.m. I pulled over, shaking, and sat with my forehead against the steering wheel until my breathing slowed. The night smelled of leaves and distant smoke. Somewhere an owl called. Everything looked normal. I drove home in silence. I told myself it had been exhaustion, a microsleep, a hallucination born of caffeine and isolation. That explanation almost works. Almost. Except sometimes, when I'm alone on a long stretch of highway, I notice the lane markers hesitate when I blink. And in the mirror, if I don't look directly, there's a darker patch of darkness keeping perfect time with my breathing, waiting for me to remember how thin the world really is. I lifted my hands, then set them back down, testing it. The vibration was real. It traveled up through the column and into my palms, a soft tremor that made my bones feel hollow. The dashboard clock read 1:12 a.m. I had been driving since sunset. The last town had slipped behind me hours ago, its lights dissolving into the rearview mirror like embers sinking into ash. Now there was only the highway and the dark, my headlights cutting a narrow corridor through emptiness. At first, I told myself it was the engine. Old car. Rough road. Thermal expansion. There were 100 explanations that didn't involve whatever my nerves were whispering. Still, the hum persisted. It wasn't mechanical. It had a cadence. A slow, tidal rise and fall, as though something enormous were drawing breath beneath miles of pavement. The radio offered no comfort. Every station dissolved into static or distant fragments of talk, half-formed voices discussing weather, faith, lost pets. Eventually, even that vanished, leaving only a thin, high whine. I turned it off. Silence flooded the cabin. The highway ran straight as a ruler, disappearing into a vanishing point that refused to approach. Beyond the reach of my headlights, the world felt unfinished, like a stage set waiting for actors who never arrived. No trees, no fences, no stars, just black. The hum deepened. I felt it in the soles of my shoes. The lane markers began to drift. Not dramatically, just enough to make my eyes ache if I stared too long. The dashed white lines wavered, spacing themselves unevenly, then sliding back into alignment. The right shoulder crept inward, narrowing my lane by a fraction, then retreated. I blinked hard and rolled my neck. "Get it together," I murmured. Fatigue does strange things to perception. That's what I told myself. Long-distance truckers hallucinate animals. Pilots see phantom lights. The mind fills empty space with motion. But fatigue didn't explain the way the asphalt subtly rose and fell, like skin over ribs. I eased off the accelerator. The speedometer dipped. 58. 55. The sensation of forward motion didn't change. I passed a long crack in the road, shaped like a crooked lightning bolt. A moment later, I passed it again. My pulse began to climb. I checked the mirrors. Behind me was a wall of darkness so complete it looked solid. No headlights, no distant glow. It felt less like I was moving through the night and more like the night was being carried with me, wrapped around the car like a cocoon. My phone had no signal. The GPS still showed a thin blue line extending endlessly forward, my little arrow gliding along it with obedient optimism. The hum swelled. This time it came with a pressure change, a gentle pop in my ears. The steering wheel trembled more noticeably, and the vibration crept up into my wrists. The pavement began to shift, not in a way that registered as bumps or potholes. The surface softened, losing its granular texture, becoming smooth and dark like polished stone. The lane markers sank into it, swallowed without ripples. The shoulder blurred, then simply stopped existing. Ahead, the highway narrowed. I leaned forward, heart thudding, searching for an explanation. Construction, maybe a bridge, some kind of optical illusion. Then the road flexed. A shallow wave traveled from left to right, lifting one side of the lane and setting it back down. My suspension absorbed it without complaint, but I felt the movement through the seat, through my spine. Something was moving underneath. The hum synchronized with it. A reflection bloomed in the distance. Red taillights. Relief hit me so hard it made my eyes sting. Another car. Another human being. Proof that I wasn't alone in this. I flashed my headlights. The other vehicle didn't react. I closed the distance quickly. As I drew nearer, details sharpened. An older sedan, paint dulled to a matte gray, rear bumper hanging slightly crooked. Its license plate numbers refused to stay still, rearranging themselves every time I tried to read them. I pulled alongside. The driver's seat was empty. The steering wheel turned on its own in tiny increments. The dashboard glowed softly, unattended. The car maintained its speed with eerie precision, carried forward by the living road beneath it. A cold understanding slid into place. The highway didn't support vehicles. It held them. The vibrations intensified. The hum became layered, harmonics stacking atop one another until the air inside my car felt thick, gelatinous. The windshield faintly fogged from the inside, despite the heater running. I thought of turning around. I signaled left out of habit. The clicking sounded absurdly polite. The moment I began to slow, the highway stretched. The vanishing point retreated, maintaining its impossible distance. I twisted the wheel. The road curved with me. No matter how I turned, the headlights remained pointed straight ahead. My dashboard clock blinked. 1:12 a.m. Time had stalled. Something gathered in the rearview mirror. At first it was only darker darkness, a distortion in the air. Then it acquired depth, becoming tall and narrow, its outline flickering like corrupted footage. It did not reflect light, consumed it, pulling shadows inward. It matched my speed without effort. I accelerated. The engine roared. 70, 80, 90. The edges of the world blurred, but the shape behind me sharpened, as though it appreciated the chase. The hum surged into a low thunder. The steering wheel bucked in my hands. The pavement ahead rose in a slow arch, forming a glossy spine that carried me upward. The empty car in the other lane unraveled. Its taillights stretched into thin red filaments and snapped, the rest of it dissolving into motes that sank into the road like rain into soil. The highway simplified into a single, gleaming ribbon suspended in black space. I felt pressure in my chest, like deep water. The breathing beneath the asphalt grew louder, no longer subtle. Each inhalation lifted the road. Each exhalation let it sag. I smelled ozone and hot metal and something organic beneath it, a faint copper tang. The end appeared as a vertical wall of darkness, not an obstacle so much as a boundary where distance stopped meaning anything. My headlights painted it in pale arcs that were immediately devoured. The presence behind me closed in. My rearview mirror fractured into spiderweb cracks. I could feel the vibration in my teeth, in the wet softness behind my eyes. I thought of ordinary things, dirty dishes, my sister's laugh, the way my apartment always smelled faintly of laundry detergent. I held onto those memories like lifelines. The wall swallowed my headlights. I braced for impact. Instead, the car passed through. For an immeasurable moment, there was nothing. No sound, no motion, no sense of having a body. I felt myself thinning, spreading, becoming less a person and more an idea of one. Then gravity returned. The tires struck pavement with a jolt that rattled my ribs. Trees lined the road again, their bare branches clawing at a starless sky. A green sign announced an exit in 3 miles. The hum faded to a distant echo. My clock advanced to 1:13 a.m. I pulled over at the first turnout and sat shaking until my breathing slowed. The night smelled of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. Somewhere an animal called. Everything looked normal. I drove the rest of the way home in silence. I told myself it had been exhaustion, a microsleep, a stress hallucination layered over engine vibration and empty scenery. That explanation almost works. Almost. Except now, sometimes, when I'm alone on a long stretch of highway, I feel a faint pulse through the steering wheel. And if I keep my eyes on the road and don't check the mirrors too carefully, I can almost pretend I don't hear the breathing waiting beneath the asphalt, learning my rhythm, patient as bedrock.